appreciate you being with us. This webinar really started as a growth-oriented webinar, right? It was just one session where we talked about some of the things that you want to consider when you're growing, at least some of the things that we considered when we were growing, right? Day one, February 1st, 2019, we were 4 people, 1 customer, trying to hold everything together. And when we fast forward to today, 2025, we are 50 full-time employees, another dozen full-time contractors, supporting nearly 500 partners, over 100,000 users. It was these learnings that helped us how to get to the different milestones, right? There's a common saying when you're trying to grow, what you do for your first million doesn't work for your next 2, it doesn't work for the next 5, and it doesn't work for the next 10. So it's a constant state of iteration. So what we did was we tried to show what we learned throughout that process of growth, how we look at products, how we consider what products and how we use those products, right? How we look at automation, how we look at considerations for systems and what needs to be in those systems, because these are the things that we learned when we went through those milestones ourselves in our journey. Now that turned into another session, right? We got some feedback, and the feedback was, hey, we want to learn a little bit more about the ABM stuff. So we had a session about ABM. And we didn't expect this, but the session ran really long, right? We kind of got deep into the different moving parts of ABM, and we said we're going to have a session 3. So today we're here at this session 3. And what we want to focus on is some of the feedback we got, right, was 1, go a little faster. Okay, so we're going to go a little faster for you guys on some of the stuff that's already written out that you can review on your own afterwards. And 2, kind of to our surprise, but not really, was this feels complicated. Right? And I get it. It's a lot of moving parts. But really, it's no more complicated than troubleshooting an email server or an IIS server, right? Let's be realistic. If you ever looked at an email log, that's complicated. This stuff is just new. It's different, right? It's a different set of technologies and a different set of tools and train of thought and training that are foreign. So we just got to get the training so that we're confident in it. So today what we're going to do is we're going to pick up where we left off. So in the last session, we talked about building a process and we talked about audience selection, which is, developing your ICP. Today, we're going to talk about messaging. We're going to talk about the importance of testing and refining. And then, guys, we're going to try to knock that out in about 15 minutes. Then we're going to get to what I think is going to be the most valuable part of this series, which is a checklist, a go-to-market checklist and resources. We're actually going to give you the things that you need, right? It's very common. If you've ever been to like a Robin Robbins show, some people might leave and be like, okay, all that stuff was super obvious, right? But at the end of the day, what obvious or not, if you don't execute, you don't get results. And when it comes time to execute, if you haven't done some of these things before, you don't have the experience, you don't know where to start, you get overwhelmed, and then you end up doing nothing. So what we're going to try to do for you is we're going to give you a straight up checklist, 1 through 7. This is what you need to do, and in this order. And we're also going to give you some templates and some tools so that when you go do the thing, you have an example, you have a template. By no means is it perfect, but it is a good starting point so you can get rolling. Ideally, through your own experiences, you'll realize what works for you, your natural style, your behaviors, your team, your audience, and you'll start adapting it the same way you've adapted your SOPs for the technical side of the business. So with that said, guys, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jonathan, and we're going to start right off where we left, or we're going to start where we left off, which was on messaging.
Great, thanks, Albert. So for messaging, what we're going to do is we're going to start with like big picture. How do we design messaging? We'll talk about a couple different methods I've used to create messaging. And so let's dive into what big picture frameworks we got on the next slide. Cool. So the biggest thing I always think about with messaging is that it has to be specific, right? And it could be specific to the industry, to the size of the company. It could be specific to the problems they're encountering. Ideally, it's specific to the different roles that are in your ICP. And there's a spectrum, right, of how specific you get. And each has its place in a messaging campaign, right? And so we'll start here, right? And the most generic of all is templated. Now, templated is not, it could be sent to anybody, but it's more like the standard value proposition. It could be a specific industry or specific something, but really it's like, here's the value of this. Here's the value of this sort of, cybersecurity. Here's what you get out of it, right? And it doesn't matter if you're looking at a medical facility, a marketing agency, or a law firm. Here's the value proposition for this, or here's the incentive for this, or here's the reality of what's going on. It's templated. You could send it to pretty much anybody that you would go after, and they would get the gist of it. The problem with template is it typically doesn't speak somebody's language. And so what happens is people, right, customers don't connect with it the same way. And so to me, the most important type of content to create, the most important messaging is targeted. Now, targeted is not one-to-one, but it's not something you could send anybody. This is when you start to hit that sweet spot of industry, problem, size, and role. This is where you're saying, for somebody like you in this company, in this situation, here's what you're likely encountering, or here's what I'm seeing. This is when you start to hit on like the emotions, the things that impact them, right? It's not high-level cybersecurity. Now it's, well, running a marketing agency, here's something you may not know. Here's what I saw recently. It's much more specific to them. And it's something you could send to one of those target audiences that we talked about, right? The most personalized is tailored. Tailored, you want to, and the thing is, I want you to think of tailored as I could only send this to this person or somebody at this company. It's when you've done your research or you've learned something very specific about them where the message is going to hit home with them and them only. And I mean that in the sense of, yes, somebody in the exact same situation, the message would obviously work, but you don't know that about the other targets, right? And so tailored is when you're saying, okay, I learned this company has this security flaw or issue. And you're saying, hey, right, I've seen companies who have this. Here's what happens to them. There's a way to get ahead of it. And you're speaking only to them, right? And so the reason I talk about this is because there's some of the content you're going to see later on. You're going to realize it can be a template. You're going to realize some of it's going to be more targeted. And if you have that sort of framework, it helps you like categorize everything as you create the messaging you're going to create.
Jonathan, let me add something here before we go to the next slide. Guys, to break this down, right, in real, like, sales guy to sales guy conversation, okay? When you have a big machine, okay, not some of the stuff where you're going to start, but when you have a real machine, you have an inbound pipeline and you have an outbound pipeline, you have a real sales funnel. What you have at the top is a lot of activity, and what you have at the bottom is your drip of output from all that activity, right? So when you've got, I'm just going to make something up, when you got 1,000 activities, they're high touch, high volume. You got to be careful that they don't become high cost, right? And when you're at the very bottom, they're less touch, extremely high value. Those are the ones you want to touch a little bit more. So typically what some of the books are going to tell you is basically what Jonathan's showing here, okay? Templated, targeted, tailored. Where templated is the most fluffy stuff. Hey, I'm so-and-so from so-and-so and I do X. Can I get 15 minutes of your time? That's like, it's BS. It doesn't tell me anything. It looks like everybody else, right? Targeted is when you focus a little bit more on a message that you think has a pain point that the person could resonate, okay? And tailored is hardcore, you paid attention to them. Tailored is now you are focused on this client. You want to hunt this client. You're not going fishing and throwing bait to see what you get. You're going fishing specifically for tuna, specifically for mahi, specifically for grouper. You're going after a very particular thing. So you're spending time on their website. You're looking at what they do. You're seeing if they have any awards. You're seeing if they have any blog posts or news. And when you send a message to them, you're communicating something that is so tailored that they know the only way you could have done that is if you sat down and researched them before you reached out, okay? But you cannot do that for 50 or 500 contacts or 5,000. You can only do that for the ones that really reach a certain lead score, have indicators that they're worth your time. Now, for me personally, templated, garbage, okay? It's a waste of time. For me, it's more of a hybrid of template target, right? You got to be template target because if you waste your time with those fluffy messages, you may just totally distract the person. So in my opinion, template targeted is the right way to go, where you have this combination. And yeah, it's relatively templated, but it's still targeted to a specific person and has the right message so that from day one, we're resonating the right way. We're going to show you that in our examples.
Sweet. Thank you, Alfred. All right, so here's a couple of frameworks I used. We're going to go through these pretty quickly because you'll be able to reference them afterwards. The first one is the story framework. This is actually a revised version of the hero's journey, if anybody's familiar with Joseph Campbell's work. And a simplified version of this, right, is just saying And the reason, by the way, the reason this is important is because we often think in terms of our products and services first, but our customers are thinking in terms of what value does this bring me? And so the framework is a persona, and a persona is a role at a company in an industry, right? So that combination, they encounter a problem and they want to solve that problem, and that solving it's going to make them feel a certain way. And they enlist a guide, which is the solution or product that helps them achieve a certain success and avoid a certain failure. And writing this out actually helps me create messaging because I can turn it into emails, I can turn it into call scripts, I could even use it in ad copy, right? Because it's the journey the customer goes on if they work with me. So an example from the previous company I worked at, we often called on finance directors at utilities, right? Is, hey, when I talk to city finance directors, they often tell me their staff is overwhelmed with their workload, and that results in low staff morale, high turnover, and the frustration of having to constantly hire new team members. We've helped 50 other cities in the state reduce that workload, leading to more manageable workload, happier staff, and less turnover. It's using that framework to write what I would say is a pretty standard targeted message, right? But the goal of the framework is not to necessarily follow it word for word, it's to just understand it at that level. So that's the story framework. Albert, if you're ready, we'll move to the next framework. The next one is a little bit more big picture. This is time, money, look good, feel good. The last company I worked for, our head of sales said there are only 4 reasons people do anything: time, money, look good, feel good. He said, but you can't say it in your messaging. You can't say, I save you time and money. You can't say this is going to make you look good or feel good. But if you categorize things that way, you start to understand how this will impact them. And a lot of things will impact somebody in multiple categories, right? And so as you look at these, right, time is what tasks do you eliminate? What do you make easier? Money is, do they make money? Do they save money? Look good is, does this help them win business, get promoted, gain interest, attention? And then feel good is, does this gain them peace of mind? Does this reduce frustration, worry, etc.? And when you're able to categorize these things, it allows your conversations to be a little bit better because you're less focused on, we save you time and money, and more on, here's the specific amount of time that your team will save. Here's how you're going to feel good about this. You're going to have peace of mind. You're not going to be frustrated anymore, right? This is going to make you look good in front of that next customer or that next person who wants to work with you. So when you think of it this way, it's a little bit easier because then you're like, oh, well, they don't really want cybersecurity. They want the peace of mind that hackers aren't going to get them. And that's also going to make sure that they'll spend a little bit of money for the cybersecurity, but they won't have a $40,000 ransomware threat on their heads, and they won't lose the productivity when everything's shut down. And if we go to the next slide, there's a little bit more pointers on frameworks real quick.
And remember, guys, everyone tells you this. You don't sell on features. This is not the first time you hear that, right? You don't sell on features. But a lot of times you ask yourself, what do I say? And what Jonathan's putting in front of you is he's giving you a structure for intent. Everything you say has to be for a reason. Don't just, and the reason can be like the features are great, or it's going to give them the uptime, or they don't have to check their backups, or they don't have to worry about no, that's not the reason. The reason should tie to one of these emotional categories that it's proven humans react to things if they're related to time, money, the way they look, or the way they feel. So when you ask yourself, or you're going to say something, if you say something, ask yourself, can I relate this to time, money, the way they look, or the way they feel? If you can't, maybe you're just wasting your breath. If you can, it's probably valuable to include to the conversation.
Yeah, spot on. Okay, so content is going to be quite different, whether it's a conversation, an email, a LinkedIn message, an ad, etc. Right? And so when you're thinking about these, if you're on the phone or you're meeting somebody in person, you can oftentimes talk about 2 or 3 different problems for that specific person in that specific sort of company. And, you should figure out, right, if you're a subject matter expert with this industry, you should know which problems that are an 8 out of 10 in terms of the amount of problems they cause, the trouble they cause. And I say that because the way people think of problems, right? They think if I tell somebody I solve a 9, a 10, and a 5, 9, 10, 5, that's 24 points. But when you're listening to that, you're saying, oh, they solve a 9, a 10, and a 5. across 3 problems, that's an 8. Well, that's not bad, but it's not as effective as if you just focused on the 9 and the 10. So you want to focus on the things that you know they think about. If you're writing an email or like a LinkedIn message, you can only mention one problem. You can't give them a list of things because email requires focus. It's typically 3 or 4 sentences. So you want them to be able to follow it, right? Keep it under 100 words is the general guideline. Even the most recent data is saying 50 to 100 words is currently the sweet spot. 100 to 150 is a little long and it doesn't work as well. Beyond 150 is too much, but even short of 50 words is oftentimes too little unless it's a follow-up email. And then the last question is always, can you tailor this message? Do you know something specific about that person, that company, that situation? Because if you can say, hey, I know you're encountering this. I know you have this, right? You don't have backup. And here's what could happen. Or you don't have this resource. And here's what could happen. It's a very different message than people who have this problem, right? And so those help create a better messaging framework. So Albert, anything you want to add before we wrap up messaging and touch on test and refine real quick?
Oh, we'll actually talk about messaging again when we go through the documents, but I would say that that's accurate.
Perfect. All right. So let's dig into test and refine. Okay, next slide. Now, testing and refining, the easiest way to think of it is this is a continuous effort. This isn't something you're going to do once. It's not something you're going to do every day, though. Right. And so the way I think about this, especially as you create your initial messaging, right, the first thing you want to do is get a starting point. Whatever you do first probably won't be what you're doing in a few months and certainly not in a year, but you need a baseline of what's working and what's not. And so if certain messages don't lead to the right result, if certain actions in the sales process don't lead to the right result, you stop doing them. But you need some results or something to measure, right, and something working before you can make any changes. I always say in the beginning, aim for good enough, especially businesses. Most MSPs we work with are not huge companies. You want good enough because you want it to work. You don't care about getting that last refinement. It's better everything works at 80% optimal with far less effort than everything works at 95% because it takes so much effort to get it perfect. So just get it to good enough. Once you've got a baseline and something's working, test one thing at a time, right? Test the subject line. Test the first sentence. Test a different call opener. Test a different way you introduce your company. Don't test everything because the thing is you want the end result to be binary. Hey, we changed the subject line and I got 50% open rate instead of 30% open rate. People are opening it. Then you can test response rates. How do I improve the response rate if I can get a higher open rate? So it's a methodical process. Don't worry about fixing everything at once. As you get good enough or you start to see good results, you can improve one step at a time. Now, how you measure matters. I just touched on this a little. You can't measure for open rates, response rates, and meetings booked all at once. You have to measure one thing at a time. So for an email, focus on, are you trying to improve open rates or clicks or replies? If it's a phone call, are you trying to improve the number of people who don't hang up immediately? Or are you trying to improve the number of people who actually book a meeting? Focus on that one thing when you are doing testing or you're trying to improve things because you just can't fix it all at once. And by doing that, you start to see conversion rates. And so you can say, if I get 50% of people to open my email, how many of them reply? How can I improve that rate? If you don't have that baseline, you have not much to do. And the thing is, like I said, with test one thing, test 2 variations, an A/B test. If you start testing 3 or 4 subject lines, oftentimes it's really hard to figure out what's working because you may have just hit on something to a smaller audience, right? The last thing just to keep in mind, stuff doesn't always work. And that's part of the reason you want to continually test and refine, right? It's not something you do every day, but you'll run a test for a month or a quarter and figure out how things change. And sometimes things don't change. And that might mean you're at good enough. And that might mean you have to try something else, right? So let's talk a little bit more about what this process looks like. And we'll be able to wrap it up and dig into some of the materials. So refreshing your strategy, right? A good way of thinking about this is once you have a strategy that's working, you want to refresh it. Keyword, refresh, every year. This is not a brand overhaul. This is not redo your messaging. This is to say, what's changed or what have I learned in the last 6 to 12 months that would make me want to say different things, communicate different value or problems, right? And the main categories you'll find this are first, the more you work with an ICP, the more you'll learn about them. Even if you say, I have a ton of success with, marketing agencies. You might work with 5, you might work with 50, but you're going to realize no matter what the number is, the more you work with them, the more you'll learn about them. But also, the more you work with them, the more you'll see how their world is changing over those 6 or 12 months. And so you'll see things you didn't see before, whether it's because you're working with them more closely, with more of them, or because you're seeing how their world is changing. So that's a big thing with your ICP. Second thing is, as a subject matter expert in an industry, you're going to see insights and trends from your world, your perspective, as a technology professional, as someone who sees all these threats that are related to your business that they don't. So what are the trends, whether it's in cybersecurity, disaster recovery, VoIP, etc., that your customers may not be aware of? The things that they could learn from that would be helpful to them. And that's going to be the same sort of thing you talk to prospects about. And the last thing I always say is the last change is internal. Maybe you launched a new program, have a new product to offer, or something that's really working with your customers, right? That's a reason to reach out to people and change your messaging. This is something we did recently because we launched our app marketplace and have our first integration, which is QuickBooks. It's a reason to reach out to people and say, hey, we have this. It changes our messaging, right? And so really what you're looking for here is not a constant change, but it's just, hey, what's changed in the past 6 to 12 months, right? With my customers, in my industry, and in my business, that would change my messaging, and that allows you to update it and refresh it. So Albert, anything you want to touch on test and refine before we move into the checklist and materials?
I would only add this, right? Guys, at the core of this message here, right, these last 2 slides, what we're saying is you need to have a system, right? From the very first session, you need to have a system. Sure, you can run your ticketing out of your email, but if you did, you wouldn't know your SLAs, you wouldn't know your first call resolution, you wouldn't know anything, okay? And you would miss out on a ton of tickets. So the point here is you can't just do your marketing on a spreadsheet, right? You got to use a system, whether it be HubSpot or some CRM or some sales and marketing automation. If you use ConnectWise, I know they like to recommend Infusionsoft, whatever it is, you need a system. And then you need to start somewhere. Think about, for you guys that do the managed IT services, right? Think about the first time you onboarded a user, what that was like. You were just kind of spitballing and putting it together. Compare that to how you onboard a user today. And you probably have an extremely polished SOP for how you quote it, how you receive the contract, how you onboard them, how you deploy their services like in Azure Active Directory or email or phones or whatever they're using. You have it. You weren't born with that. Day 1, you had a very manual, difficult process, and day 3,000, now you have a very polished process. That's what we're telling you here. The only benefit is day 1, when you onboarded that customer, whether you had a process or not, you had to make it beautiful and they had to have a good experience because you needed that good experience, you needed that referral, you needed to keep the customer. Marketing is different. If you screw up in marketing, you make a mistake, no harm, no foul. Tomorrow, just make the change and do it again, okay? So that's really what the thing is here, which is do not try to design this perfectly well-oiled machine because you won't do it. And if you start complicated, it's almost impossible to simplify. You need to start simple, learn what you can learn, figure out where you're an animal at it, like where you become an expert, and then accelerate and add fuel to that piece. So have a system in place, execute in a system, have insights that you can look at, and then slowly start making iterations. And to Jonathan's point, don't change 3 things at the same time, right? It's like when you're, I'll admit, right? When we first started, I used to help in tech support every once in a while. I'd be helping someone troubleshoot some asterisk server that they were trying to configure. And then they would go and I would say, okay, make this one change, make this one change. And all of a sudden they're like, I changed A, B, C, D, and F, and I hit reload. And I'm like, oh my God, why did you make 5 changes at the same time? Now I don't know which change fixed it, right? Or I don't know what's actually happening. So that's what we're saying here. Do not iterate by changing 5 things at a time. Iterate by deciding what's something I think I can improve. Because when I look at my metrics, my open rate is really good. So I'm not worried about that. But maybe my demo rate is not that good. So let me focus on that piece. Or my open rate sucks. And if I don't get an open rate, nothing else is working. Therefore, let me focus on improving my open rate so that I can next focus on the next piece. So it's a waterfall of processes where you need to look at the first one and say, am I happy with the performance of that one so that the next one can start? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, go to the next one. If the answer is no, focus on that one. But do not do them all at the same time. So thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that. So ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do now is we're going to wrap it up with a go-to-market, right? We're going to try to wrap up 3 days worth of conversation into a quick thing that you could actually execute. So what does that look like, right? Here is the high-level ABM checklist, just in conversation, but essentially you need to identify your sequence. First things first, right? You need to know the sequence because the steps in the sequence will determine what messaging you're creating, okay, and what kind of content you're going to need, right? So what's the medium that you're going to deliver it? Is it email? Is it a social post? Is it a text message? Whatever. And then obviously based on the medium or the media, you determine what the messaging looks like. Then you got to pick your audience, okay? You have to pick the audience. That's who you're going after. And my recommendation to you is do not get involved in this whole create an ICP, create a persona. That's just way too much right now. You need to pick an audience where you're a subject matter expert. So if you're an MSP who's focused in the IT industry and you're very good at working with LPMs, and you understand how the legal industry works, and you understand they have matters and they have resources and the way they operate, that's it, right? That's a golden nugget what you have there for that industry. Perhaps you're in the hotel business and you understand the systems they use. Perhaps you're in the medical business and you understand the EMSs that they use, or you work with that, whatever it is. If you work with a particular industry, or if you have a niche in a particular vertical, right, or in a particular product, focus on that. That's my recommendation. Next, define your roles. And I'm going to save you some time. There are 4 roles that almost always exist. CEO, owner, stakeholder, operating partner, operating manager, chief nerd. You know who I'm talking about, right? The stakeholder. The next ones are going to be some sort of finance manager, some sort of operations manager, and some sort of sales manager. And these might not be the roles that you're thinking of at first, but I'm going to show you in the examples on how you can use these roles to create champions within an account that you're going after. Next, you pick your product, okay? You have to pick the product. If you were here for the first session, we said, when you pick products for your company, every product has to have an intent, and you need to be clear on what intent that is. Is this a loss leader / gateway product? Is this a money maker core product? Is this a must-have it to survive product? You need to know where every product fits in your strategic growth process. Once you define the product, now you're ready to create messaging, okay? Because you know where you're going to use it in the sequence, you know who you're going to use it for, and you know the product that you're trying to represent, right? So you're ready to start. And then you got to get to it, you got to implement. So with that, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the screen that I'm sharing so I can share a little bit more with you. Right here, on this piece right here, you guys have a link. This is a set of tools together for you guys. This link is a Dropbox folder. So let's change the sharing real quick. Set it up like this so it's a little easier to use. So guys, in there, you have that link. The password to get in here is growth, okay? Inside of this link, this is what we're sharing with you. So one, we're going to share a 16-step sequence, okay? It sounds like a lot, but it's really not. These are 16 steps spread throughout 53 days. Now, the first and last step, these are ads, okay? They're optional. I recommend it if you can, but if you can't, it's okay. Something's better than nothing. So what does this step look like? So you've identified your audience, you know the accounts you're going after, right? You're going after abcpizza.com and you're going after abcattorney.com, whatever it is, you know their domain. So what you want to do is you want to do targeted ads against that domain. Where do you do that? LinkedIn, Reddit, Instagram or Meta, YouTube, right? Google, you name it, and you can do targeted ads. So my recommendation is you want to start building frequency. Targeted ads, they're extremely cheap, right? They usually cost a couple dollars per 1,000 impressions. And targeted ads are they're not intended to get a call to action. You're not expecting to someone see your ad and be like, oh, I want that, click it, go to your website, sign up for a $2,000 contract. No, that's not what we're doing here. We're using these targeted ads so that your logo and your messaging is scrolling in front of that person. Because subconsciously, once someone has seen you a certain amount of times, they start to recognize you. And that's all you want to do. You don't want to be a virgin brand. You want to be something that they subconsciously or subliminally recognize because they've seen it before. So turn on your ads. Then you're going to do something, okay, like a post or comment. So do not, by all means, do not go to LinkedIn and put a friend request. or I guarantee you, you will never hear from that person ever again, okay? Instead, what you want to do is you go to LinkedIn and look for a comment or post that they made that you genuinely agree with. Do not ever change for anybody. Look, I'm here in a hat, wearing a polo. This is the way I am, no matter where I'm at, right? So do not change who you are. So if they make a comment that you don't agree with is controversial, let it be. But if they make a comment that you agree with, or they're celebrating something, celebrate it, congratulate them, agree with them. That feeds people, and they cannot help but liking that. It's a dopamine reaction. We can't help it, guys. So you're going to like a post or a comment, and that's it. Then you're going to come back 2 days later, and you're going to add a positive reply. Agree with them. Say something to one of their posts or comments. Give them recognition. Notice I'm never doing the LinkedIn friend requesting, okay, connection request. Then on day number 5, you're going to send an email. It's going to be informational. So we're going to classify our emails into 3 types. Okay, so just like before he explained, you have templated, targeted, and tailored. When it comes to emails, I'm going to call them informational, nurturing, and call to action. Okay, now they're all going to be templated, targeted, what I'm going to share with you. But I'm also going to share what exactly is informational, nurturing, and call to action. So day number 5, you send an informational email. Day number 12, you send another informational email. Day number 19, you send a nurturing email. Look at that, guys. It's been almost 3 weeks before I even waste my time making a call, because I do not need to call that person and say, hey, I'm so-and-so with so-and-so, to have them hang up on me. Okay, that's not what we're looking for. And I'm not, you might see some sequences where you're like emailing twice a week, over and over. We're not trying to give anybody email fatigue either. That's just not going to help the cause. So day number 19, you're doing your nurturing email and you're following up with a phone call, because studies show that people are slightly more likely to answer the same day you sent them an email, for whatever the reason might be. If you do not succeed, okay, your sequence is continuing. Day number 23, 4 days later, another nurturing follow-up in a call. Day number 27, a call to action with a call. And then if you didn't get anything out of that harder attempt to connect, you're going to kind of put them on ice for a minute, okay? Day number 41 and 48, you're going to send 2 more nurturing emails. Then on 52, you're going to send a call to action email with a follow-up call. And if you still have no results, you're going to disable the targeted ads and consider the sequence to be done. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a starting sequence, okay, that is trying to accomplish what a big sophisticated machine would do. A big sophisticated machine would have the same 15 steps, except it would have a breakout for marketing recycled lead. It would have a breakout for sales recycled lead. It would have a put them on ice. It would have a breakout for getting ghosted. It would have a breakout for lead scoring, not going up or down. It would be a complicated machine, right? Like the one that we're starting to build, and I shared with you guys at one of the last calls. This one is trying to bring a little bit of all of that into one sequence so you can get started. So now that we know exactly what the sequence is, what we're going to be doing, when we're going to be doing it, okay? And by the way, guys, I went through the go-to-market checklist on the presentation, but here is an actual executable checklist for you. So when it comes to building a sequence, create your own or use the template we gave you. When it comes to doing the audience, again, we tell you pick a subject matter expertise or pick somewhere where you are a subject matter expert. We talked about the roles. We talked about the product, we talked about the messaging, and we talked about tracking the implementation. So the same thing you have on the slide, you got a checklist, you can really make sure you're doing it. Now that we know what the sequence is, okay, it's time to start handling the email templates, right? That's probably the first part of the messaging that you want to do. So when it comes to the email templates, let's go ahead and open this here. And my screen just became unresponsive. Let me see what's going on. Okay. So when it comes to the email templates, one of the things that we've given you is, I mentioned before, you have different types of email, right? You have informational, nurturing, and call to action. So what I've done here for you is I've explained the purpose, the intent of each one. What is an informational email? What is its purpose? Okay, the kind of content that you might have in an informational email. the tone and style, what you want to focus on, what you want to avoid. So for example, in an informational email where you're warming up the lead, you do not want to mention your company and services. You do not want to have any call to actions. You do not want to have any technical or dramatic language. And you are just you're not trying to plant a seed and be too obvious. You're just trying to increase your awareness, okay? You want to be helpful to the person. The nurturing email is a version of that, but it's starting to be a little bit more specific, okay? And again, we're going to give you the purpose, the types, the tone, what to focus on and what to avoid. So you have that for each one. I'd love to go through it for you, but I think we're going to run out of time, so I'm going to keep moving. But all the information is here for you guys to learn, okay? If you ever need to have a quick comparison, you also have a comparison table. So if you want to sit down with your sales team or sit down with the team or you want to have a high-level view, you have a comparison table that breaks it out for you. Now, when it comes to the templates themselves, we've provided you an example for each role and each type. So I mentioned earlier going after sales managers, right? And I said, hey, you might not think about a sales manager when you're pitching cybersecurity or you're pitching backup or disaster recovery. And here we actually have a pretty good example of why you might do that, right? So let's go ahead and jump to the nurturing email as an example. So what we'll do here is we give you samples. So here are some subject lines options. Of course, modify them, make them your own. And then we have a kind of email that you might send in nurturing. So like, for example, hey, Albert, we spoke with a sales manager whose team lost an entire afternoon after a quoting tool went down for a vendor outage. No emails, no log calls, no follow-ups. The deals didn't die, but the momentum did, and they couldn't get back. Nobody blamed IT, but the commission checks were lighter that month. Have you ever wondered what downtime costs your pipeline? I didn't put a call to action. I didn't say, would you like to talk to me? What I did was I asked a question to invoke curiosity. Now, you may like this example, or you may think this example is silly, and that's not the point. The point is the intent of what we're trying to write. I don't pitch MSP services. I don't sell backup. I don't sell disaster recovery. I sell something else completely, right? So I'm not an expert in writing these things for you. This is an idea. Now here you have a template for that idea, right? So we give you, okay, hi, first name. We spoke with whose team lost, insert a time, after, insert the issue. Who, what was lost, and what was the issue, okay? And then the result. So you can use that in any way you want to put the information in there. Again, you're gonna have templates for sales managers, for stakeholders, CEO, owner, etc., for finance managers, and for operations managers. Now, once you've wrapped up that piece, you're going to be ready to start. Here, let's get you back to the main folder. Once you've done that, you're ready to start handling your call scripts, okay? Because at the end of the day, when you're calling people, you need to know what to say, right? You don't want to be like, I'm so-and-so from so-and-so, and this is what I do. That's not going to work very well, right? So when you're talking to people, you're going to want to understand what should you be saying. So in our sequence, there are four, if I believe, 4 phone calls in the 16-step sequence, okay? So what we've done for you guys is that we've created a small script. This is just a starting point. It's not a script that you read off. It's talking points so you know how to orchestrate or how to structure the conversation as you're trying to have it, right? And we do it for each one. We give you what you should be talking about in step 6, first contact cold call. Step 8, follow up after nurturing. Step 10, call to action after follow-up, and step 14, last attempt, okay? Now, this is kind of the same thing, in which case we tell you, what should you be focusing on this type of call? There's things you do and don't want to talk about. You don't want to talk about marriage and kids in your first date with somebody. Maybe you do, but you probably shouldn't, right? It's too soon to be talking about that. You got to wait a little bit longer. So you don't want to be talking about specific solutions or specific anything. You just met this person. How could you possibly know what's a feature or benefit? How could you possibly know what pain they have? You haven't had a conversation yet. So you got to be real careful what you say. So we tell you what to focus on. We tell you what to avoid. We give you a couple of examples on opening options. And then we do the same thing. We give you a script, right? So you do have to introduce yourself. Hey, Albert, how are you? I'm Jonathan, right? Pick one of the openers, pause. Let them react, and understand that the reaction is usually an objection. Hey, I don't have time for this right now. I already have an IT guy. No, I'm not interested. My cousin does it. I'm locked into contract. That's what you can expect 90% of the time. So take a pause and react accordingly. Do not react reactively, or you will say the wrong thing. Okay. So we give you an example for each. Now, when it comes to objections, we've also tried to help you guys a little bit on objection handling. We think this is something very important for your entire team to have, right? So on the objection handling, again, I'm going to say this. I do not work in your business. We are not here providing an MSP growth class. We're here as colleagues sharing what we learned and how we feel that this could be applied to the MSP space, okay? So by all means, am I saying I'm an expert in this? But we understand the necessity of it, right? And we're fluent in some of your language. So what we try to do is come up with what we feel are likely objections you might see on your side, right? I already have an IT provider. We handle it internally. Just send me an email. We're too small for that, right? We've never had an issue where we're under contract. I don't have a budget, right? I had a previous bad experience. I don't want to touch it. It's not a priority. This is probably what you could say is, an argument for anything, right? So we give you some suggested responses on how to handle that and some key talking points, right? That should be guiding your intent on everything that you say. And then the very last thing that we share with you guys are some just additional tools, okay? So if you see that you're now starting to mature, you're getting the ball rolling, you're getting a little momentum, all of a sudden this conversation isn't voodoo anymore, but it's starting to make sense, you understand the moving parts, then you want to get fancier with your work, right? Then you might want to do, for example, some lead scoring. And here we just give you some pointers on how we see you could possibly do lead scoring here. Lead scoring, I'll tell you right now, this is going to require a CRM. Okay, lead scoring on a spreadsheet is damn near impossible. So if you got to this, congratulations. I'd love to hear from you. It would make me super happy, right, to understand that someone actually took this information and grew and they reached to this stage. But once you get to this stage, we have some information we share with you. And if you want to, you can go ahead and use it. The same thing for role research. We give you 2 workbooks. I won't open those now. And those workbooks are basically ICP. So once you've advanced to the point where you say, okay, I went after subject matter expert stuff. I went after everybody who is in this industry, everybody who's using this billing system, everybody who's using whatever, and you're starting to run out of obvious ideas, then you might want to say, okay, let's get fancy, let's develop an ICP. So we give you some ICP workbooks where you can start writing everything out, identifying the pains, the benefits, the roles, and you can start evolving. But to start, guys, again, don't go through any of that. Just pick a role or pick an industry or a vertical where you're a subject matter expert and run like there's no tomorrow. And I promise you, you won't be upset with the results. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get back to our standard presentation. That wraps it up, guys. We're at 45 minutes. So it looks like we're at 46 minutes. So it looks like we almost made it on time. Now we did have, I think we had a couple questions throughout. I don't know if I saw those afterwards. I'd love to answer any questions that we have. We have time on our side, guys. So if you do, please ask away and we're here for you.
And Albert, I'm unmuting everybody because I know you like talking more than Q&A and a chat. So everyone, you are unmuted. So if you'd like to ask Jonathan or Albert a question, feel free.
Don't have to call everybody at once, guys.
I know. You did so good, Albert. They're already like building their ICPs and they're on LinkedIn liking things right now. So
they know it all. All right, guys. Well, listen, it was great. If we don't have any questions, we do appreciate your time. And remember, like I said earlier, even obvious things don't work if they're not done properly or at all. And it's always better to start small and understand and learn from those small failures that teach you how to go big. Because if you try to go big, you're definitely going to fail, right? We just don't have the experience, the tools, the resources. So with that, thank you for joining us. I do appreciate it. And if you ever have any questions, if you ever just want to talk, please feel free to reach out. I'm very accessible. I'd be happy to talk to anybody anytime.
Yeah, great. And so for those of you who did join and are interested in this type of content, we are going to have Zach Messler back. So keep an eye out. Zach's going to do a really great branding. So kind of falls in line with this. So, we're actually calling it, what to be when you sell the same damn thing as everyone else. So, so if you're looking for more of this type of content, we'll have it soon with Mr. Messler. So
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even know we were doing that. I like Zach. I've worked with Zach in the past. He's a very animated guy. He knows this stuff. He's not an IT person. He's not in this particular space, but he really understands the science of talking to people, right? What to say, when to say it, what to avoid. So from that perspective, I think it's going to be a great opportunity for everybody, including our own team.
Yeah, we have him on. It's actually September 11th. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll be seeing you guys soon.
Cool. Thank you guys. Have a great day.